Can you wear sensible shoes and be cool as well? We'll find out this week on Motoring 2002.
TSN's Motoring 2002 is brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.
You know, in my dad's generation, when the big three dominated the North American automotive world, customers, for the most part, were loyal. My dad, for instance, only bought GM product and usually an Oldsmobile. But then the imports invaded the continent, and buyers, especially the younger ones, had more choice, and loyalty became a thing of the past. I mean, look what happened to Oldsmobile as well as Plymouth. Well, experience being the best teacher, other car companies weren't about to make that same mistake. I mean, take Toyota, for example. The Camry has been the #1 selling passenger car in North America for the past 4 years. But the owners are getting older. Toyota knows they must attract a younger buyer. Well, they think they have the answer, and we're going to check it out this week. It's the 5th generation Camry, a car that Toyota hopes will both be sensible as well as hip.
What we've tried to do with this car is add some passion to it. Obviously we've got QDR, quality, dependability, reliability in the existing Camry. What we've tried to do is just try to add some emotion to it. We've got lots of loyal customers. We wanted to expand the base of customers by adding some younger buyers to our mix.
When we first started the program, it was pretty tough because you've got a #1 selling car, and we've seen some of our competition go out and try to redo a lot of things. We knew that the old car didn't evoke much emotion from our customers, and so we went after styling as a very high priority in the development process. The official development time that we had is a 26-month development time. Our previous car, which was done 5 years ago, was 36, just to put that in context, so it's quite a big reduction. And we've been able to do some unique things with the process in bringing the car to market and developing the car so that we could save quite a bit of money through the development process and pass on a big portion of that to the consumer with lower prices.
Price was definitely critical for this generation. We've always had quality, but it came at a premium. With this generation, we've really addressed that, we think. We've lowered our MSRPs and added tons of spec to the vehicle. So I think this year we've got a really competitive package.
I'd say the biggest feature compared to the old one is room. It's got a lot more rear seat room, and for a lot of people that's going to be a very important deal. And certainly the styling gives it a little pizzazz that it's never had before.
We have a brand new L4 powertrain, makes 157 horsepower. The old L4 we had was around 132 horsepower, so you can see there's a very significant gain there. We've also added quite a bit of noise isolation with the engine. We've adopted a new mounting system which makes that 4-cylinder virtually vibration-free.
I think I've driven every generation of it. In fact, I know I have. And each one has been a little better than the last, and that's pretty much what we've got with this one. It's an evolutionary change, I think. The car is a very good car. The last generation, or current generation, is a very good car for what it's designed to do as a family car, and I think they've just added refinement in very many areas to this, and just made it an all-around better car.
I don't think this is a car for 20 or 30-year-olds. Certainly it's a very good family car. It's just a middle-of-the-road sort of car that will attract people that don't want to be too conspicuous, but want something that's competent, that's reliable, that's high quality, that they can depend on.
I would have to say Accord is the main competition. I mean, there's some other cars around in that category, obviously, but I'd have to think they would be targeting Accord. And you know, those are the two top family cars in the country, in my opinion. And it's a tough race. And these guys have just upped the ante a little bit, you know.
It's a huge campaign for us, and it's a very, very important vehicle. Corolla has always been the #1 vehicle for us, and the compact segment has always been the most important in Canada. The midsize is right up there in terms of importance. This Camry is critical, and early indications of sales look like it's going to be a winner for us.
I think we've got a winner here. We hope so.
School buses sure have changed since I was a kid. Well, some things haven't changed. Sit down and shut up! More later on Kenzie's Corner.
The ultimate irony in all of this is that despite repeated references in the owner's manual to anti-lock brakes, they are not an option regardless of how much you're prepared to pay. When Kia came to Canada, they didn't get off to the best of starts, primarily because the Cephia and Sportage were not what you could call good cars. That changed somewhat with the launch of the Magentis. It proved to be a remarkably good mid-size sedan. This week on Test Drive, we take a look at the Spectra. Now this car, they hope, will continue to spruce up that image. First impressions of Spectra are good, as the clear-lensed headlights and taillights lend a polished look to an attractive style, which is a refreshing change in a segment where many of the offerings are as spicy as plain bread. Spectra also surprised in the handling department. Suspended on McPherson struts at each corner and anti-roll bars at both ends, all of which is tuned by Lotus, the feel rivals that of more expensive designs. When pressed into a corner, the body does start to roll noticeably. However, once it takes a set, it maintains that attitude, and in the pylon test, that meant little drama. A quick and responsive power-assisted steering setup and P185/65 R14 all-season tyres contribute nicely to the overall effect. Indeed, only when you encounter a badly rippled section of tarmac mid-corner does the back end begin to jitter, making the car feel a little wobbly at the knees. Now that tells you that this vehicle doesn't have anti-lock brakes. Now before I get chastised, you know, this vehicle competes in a very price-sensitive end of the market. Let me explain to you that it's got power locks, windows, mirrors and cruise control. I'd gladly trade those, chuck in a couple of $100 and have this car equipped with ABS. You know what? Power windows are never going to save your life. Anti-lock brakes might just do that. The ultimate irony in all of this is that despite repeated references in the owner's manual to anti-lock brakes, they are not an option regardless of how much you're prepared to pay. It is indeed a sad commentary that Kia Canada has such little regard for the safety of the denizens of the Great White North. It's notable that anti-lock brakes are available in the United States. Go figure. After my ABS rant, you already know that this thing comes with power locks, windows and mirrors, and steering wheel mounted cruise control. Elsewhere, it comes very nicely attired. The seats have got plenty of manual adjustment, lots of lateral support, and indeed very comfortable. There's also plenty of headroom, and likewise in the rear. Elsewhere, air conditioning, a decent AM/FM stereo, and they've got them mounted in the right order, and you also get a CD player and a set of instruments that are rather bland but nonetheless functional. The one place they fall down, all of this black plastic around here. It just is too plasticky. Power comes from a 1.8-litre twin-cam 4 that develops 125 horsepower and 108 pounds-feet of torque. Hardly the strongest numbers, but enough that the work ethic is a match for the 1,232 kilograms it's expected to motivate. Matting the pedal delivers enough initial push off the line that you don't feel as though you're about to rear-end the front bumper, well, at least for the most part, and in the mid-range there's enough oomph to satisfy. A pair of transmissions relay the engine's effort to the road. The 5-speed manual brings a somewhat sloppy gate, but a nice clutch and shaves about $1,000 off the as-tested price. The other is a 4-speed automatic that includes an on-off switch for the overdrive. You know, at times the engine on this Spectra feels decidedly lethargic. In reality, it's got nothing to do with the engine and all to do with the transmission, primarily because it's not in the right gear. When you come down to a right-hand corner, you make the corner. When you go back on the gas, it hasn't gone down enough gears. Consequently, the engine lugs. If you nail the gas pedal, it will go down to the right gear, putting the engine and transmission on the same page. When they're not on the same page, well, it's a rather sad story. From a safety perspective, the Kia rates as acceptable. Combining tilt steering with the multi-adjustable seat allows a good driving position to be set with minimal fuss. And then there are, of course, the usual front airbags and adjustable front seatbelt anchors. You know, this Spectra is a half-decent little car. Half-decent because it's got good ride and handling, a comfortable interior, and it's affordable. The other half? Well, they need to address the transmission and put ABS on it. When those two facets are corrected, this car is worth a serious look. So far, the Trailblazer is living up to expectation. The engine is as smooth as freshly whipped butter, the transmission likewise, and when you think that the regular Blazer was once GM's prime compact offering, you really do shake your head, especially when it comes to long-distance comfort. Where the original was merely mediocre, the Trailblazer is outstanding, offering above-average comfort for all, including those relegated to the back seat. As for cargo, we've humped the Camry equipment around, never having been left looking for more space. Perhaps the one shortfall is the lack of a third-row seat. Given that the new Explorer offers it, it's an omission that will likely hinder GM in the long run. On our next update, we look at the four-wheel drive system, or should that be lack thereof? Stay tuned.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns breaking in a brand new engine. Obviously, in most cases, that means you've just taken delivery of a brand new vehicle, but it could be that you just replaced the engine on your high mileage used vehicle. In any case, the first few thousand kilometers could be critical. There's a few basic things that you should keep in mind. First of all, avoid sustained high-speed driving, avoid idling the engine, and wherever possible, try to vary your speed. If you're cruising on the highway, occasionally lift out of the throttle, then re-accelerate. A few other things to keep in mind: if it's a tow vehicle or a heavily loaded truck, the first tank of gas, I recommend that you drive the vehicle under light load conditions. And something that I've always practiced at the shop, when we replace an engine, we always, if it's in the heat of the summer, drive that vehicle late in the evening when the air is much cooler. The hottest part of the summer, if you take delivery of a new car or replace that engine, leave it till the evening and drive it 3 or 4 hours that evening in the cool night air. Oil and coolant temperatures are significantly lower. It just makes life a whole lot easier on a brand new engine. That's your Midas tip of the week.
The ES300 is really a strong car. We needed to be a strong car for Lexus. It's been a car over the years that has been the basis for our brand. With this car, we will bring back the volume that we had back to the 2000 level. So it is our top tier volume within the brand. it's an extremely competitive segment. We see different tiers within the segment. There's a sport tier, there's a luxury tier, and then there's a break based on price. Really, we see the C-Class Mercedes as the main competitor for this car. Secondary, probably Audi and Jaguar. Really, and really focus more towards the luxury side than the sports side. This is truly aimed at the luxury buyer within the segment. It's truly entry level into the segment. So the people that are here, we've seen them stay in the ES300 and move up through the brand to the LS430, the GS430, even the SC430, or move over the sport utility segment. So it really is the growth, long-term growth of the brand needs to be successful.
You know, nobody has ever questioned Toyota quality, but it's always come at a price. But believe it or not, the third generation Camry, Toyota thought they were giving us too much content for the price, so they decontented the fourth generation Camry. Well, as we heard earlier, they've done a complete reversal on the fifth generation. The Camry now has more content at a better price. Well, ditto for the Lexus ES300. This year's model comes $600 cheaper than last year, but they've added $3,100 of content to the Lexus. How do they do it? Well, it's called platform sharing. In fact, no fewer than 6 Toyota models share the Camry platform. It's a great way to cut costs, including research and development. Now, can they sell more vehicles? Well, last year they sold 700 300s. This year, the projection is 1,700. How about that? All right, now let's head to the Quaker State Garage and join Bill Gardner.
Well, Brad, they may have dropped the base price versus the last Camry, but I'll tell you, if you're looking at the whole ownership picture, you have to look at a lot of things if you're going to keep the car for a long period of time. And scheduled maintenance is one key area where the domestics in a car like this Chevy Impala may have a significant advantage over cars like the Camry. And I'll tell you why. One of the main reasons is the way the powertrain and specifically the engine bay is configured. The Impala, for example, has a pushrod V6 engine. Now, a pushrod engine is inherently more compact in its packaging, makes for a less cluttered engine bay and more room around the engine to service things like the spark plugs, water pump, belts, alternator, and filters. There's a lot of room in this engine bay in terms of today's cars. Quite easy car to service. And one other key area where a car like the Impala has an advantage is the configuration of the valve train on the engine. This engine, being a pushrod engine, has a chain-driven camshaft located in the block. That's lubricated by the engine oil, doesn't require tensioning or replacement at any interval. Now, when you get to the cars like Camry and its competitor, the Accord, they're typically overhead cam engines with belts driving the overhead cam. These belts need to be replaced at a scheduled interval. Now, if you've talked to somebody who's got a front-wheel drive car with an overhead cam engine and had to replace their timing belt, the timing belt is quite an expensive replacement item on many cars, and in many cases they call for replacement of the water pump and one or more tensioners as well. By the time the smoke clears, you may have a bill for $700 to $800 on some of these modern vehicles simply to replace the timing belt, even though it never broke. A vehicle like this, there is no timing belt to break, there's no adjustments to be made. The lifters in this engine are hydraulic, there's no adjustment required there either. You take this thing in for servicing, it's basically an oil change and check the filters. The coolant on this car, for example, doesn't need to be changed for 5 years or 240,000 kilometers. It's a very low maintenance vehicle. That's one area where it has an advantage. Now, I own some GM vehicles, I also own a Honda car. I like tinkering with my Honda car, adjusting the valves and changing the timing belt, etc. For me, it's a labor of love, but for you, it's something you'll have to pay somebody like me to do. It's something you want to think about if you're going to keep the car for a lot of years and or put a lot of mileage on it. It's something you want to factor in. Scheduled maintenance. Compare it. There's big differences to be had versus domestic and import cars. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2002.
I think we all know the history, really, of Audi. We had a terrible case of unintended acceleration. The company came very near to what we call an extinction point. So we're now seeing ourselves on a tide of success sweeping in, really fueled by all the new models, and hope that will increase with the launch of the new A4 that we see today.
not a right-thinking person in this country, and this better include all of you, who would think about putting a kid in the passenger car without using a seatbelt system that's appropriate for the kid's age, weight, and height. And yet every morning and afternoon, millions of Canadian kids get into school buses and there's not a seatbelt in sight. Are we exposing them to unnecessary danger? Worse still, are we giving them a double message? Hey Dad, I don't have to wear a belt in the bus. Why do I have to wear one in the passenger car? Because I've been doing a little homework, see? And this book shows that you're 172 times safer in a school bus as it is than in a passenger car. Now that seems a bit hard to believe. That's what the numbers say. But part of the reason is school buses are huge. They weigh tons compared to a passenger car. And we all know from the laws of physics, if you're in a big thing and it rolls over a little thing, you're going to win in the big thing. Secondly, these buses aren't like they were when we were at school. They got these padded cushions front and rear. They talk about the concept of compartmentalization. The kid sits in a little cocoon. If the bus hits anything, he bounces off a nice soft cushion instead of into the metal frame like we used to have to carve our initials into. These seats are attached to the frame much more sturdily than before. The fuel systems are much better protected, so the risk of fire is less. Speaking of fire, if there is an incident like that, you've got one driver, 72 kids. How is he going to help 72 kids get out of seatbelts? Maybe the seatbelts could cause more danger than they prevent. Plus, the seatbelt on the lap situation for a kid, the spine can be injured with a lap belt. And another thing this book points out, more kids are killed by being run over by school buses than killed inside them. You're safer inside the bus. Now, I'm not saying we're finished with school bus safety. Research continues to try and make these things even safer because after all, the death of one child is one death too many. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Before we go, a few final comments on the new 2002 Camry, a car once described as unspectacular, but does things with precision and grace. Well, the latter is still true, but the question still remains, will this new design attract a younger buyer? Well, in what the company is calling their biggest campaign ever, they're about to spend $160 million US to try and pump some excitement and emotion into what has been a sensible image. Time will tell. And in the near future, Graham Fletcher will be taking a closer look at the new Camry on Test Drive. Make sure you join us for that as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
I'm delighted that we've had the opportunity to deliver an all-wheel drive Jaguar. We think it's very competitive. At the end of the day, you're the guys that will decide that and the customers out there that buy it. The competition should worry.
TSN's Motoring 2002 has been brought to you by Quaker State Motor Oils, formulated for the vehicles you drive and the way you drive them. And Midas. Keep a good thing going. Go Midas.